Challenger!
Welcome viewer. This is the third video in the series where I debunk a bunch of flat earth proof from the channel Is Bible from Heaven? Is the Earth a Globe? So let's jump into it.
Flat Earth Proof 7. Down South. The distance between Sydney, Australia and Nelson, New Zealand on the ball Earth, given their coordinates and sparing you the spherical trigonometry, should be 1,310 miles, but the Australian Handbook, Almanac, Shippers and Importers Directory states the measured distance as being 1,550 miles.
Wait, let me see if I can find that reference. Obviously I don't have that almanac, but maybe internet can help. Well, couldn't find it. I found one copy at archive.org, but that was only the 1891 version. Too recent, I guess. Time for some logical connection. I know this channel uses Eric Dubay's book a lot, and in turn, Eric uses Zetetic Astronomy, so I should be able to find it in both. What a surprise. Well, not really. I mean, I did find it before writing the script, but logically it made sense. Reading from Zetetic. Recently published of New Zealand in the Australian Handbook, Almanac and Shippers and Importers Directory for the year 1872. Call me old-fashioned. Well, no, you can't. I kind of don't think 1872 is recent. So am I old-fashioned or not? Thankfully, Eric also lifted the following paragraph. The two places are nearly on the same latitude, and the difference in longitude is 22 degree 2 minutes 14 seconds. The whole matter now becomes a mere arithmetical question. If 22 degree 2 minutes 14 seconds gives 1550 latitude miles, what will 360 degree give? The answer is 25,182 miles. Now the first issue. I mean, do we really need to? A book from about 150 years ago, which gave us a value that is incorrect. Okay. Maybe that almanac didn't give the distance as the crow flies. Maybe you guys messed up the conversion. Just for giggle, assume the original value given was in statute miles, but you guys treated it as nautical and then converted it again. So if I deconvert, I get a value of 1,346 miles. On screen, you should see a basic ship path. Remember, we are talking about shipping routes and the distance it shows. But at the end, do I care? Nope. On a tangent, Greek mathematician, the great Eratosthenes, back in 240 BC, calculated the circumference of the Earth. Today, most scientists set the Earth's circumference at 40,096 kilometers. That gives Eratosthenes' estimate less than a 1% error, an excellent approximation of the Earth's circumference. My point being, over time we develop better system and get to more accurate value. Bringing up an old book and showing the distance difference is not logical. About their arithmetic, well, the only place that formula would work if both location is sitting at the equator, but they reside on different latitude and longitude. The correct way would be first to calculate the angle between two places. On a sphere, that angle is acos of sine of latitude A times sine of latitude B plus cosine of latitude A times cosine of latitude B times cosine of latitude B minus latitude A. Simple. Plug these values. So we get an angle of 18.88 degrees. Now using your assumed distance of 1,310 miles, calculated circumference of the Earth is 1,310 times 360 divided by 18.88 or 24,978 miles. Scientists give a value of 24,901 mile, so our equation has an error margin of around 0.3%. I would say that is pretty good.
Antarctica is said to be a continent of ice situated at the bottom of the ball from 78 degrees south latitude. It should therefore not have a perimeter greater than 12,000 miles. However, early explorers like Captain Cook and James Clark Ross, in attempting to circumnavigate Antarctica, took 3 to 4 years to do so, and clocked in the distance traveled at 50 to 60,000 miles.
Ah, Captain Cook. He was born not too far away from where I live. Now the first thing that comes into my mind that these people never played a pirate game or any game with fog of war. Then they would understand the dynamics of uncharted area. This video is talking about his second voyage, from 1772 to 1775, commissioned by the British government and was designed to circumnavigate the globe as far south as possible to finally determine whether there was any great southern landmass or Terra Australis. On his first voyage, Cook had demonstrated by circumnavigating New Zealand that it was not attached to a larger landmass to the south, and he charted almost the entire eastern coastline of Australia. Yet, Terra Australis was believed to lie farther south. On 17th of January 1773, Resolution was the first ship to venture south of the Antarctic Circle. Cook undertook a series of vast sweeps across the Pacific, finally proving there was no Terra Australis in temperate latitudes by sailing over most of its predicted locations. In the course of the voyage, he visited Easter Island, the Marquesas, Tahiti's, the Society Islands, Niue, the Tonga Islands, the New Hebrides, New Caledonia, Norfolk Island, Palmerston Island, South Sandwich Island, and South Georgia, many of which he named in the process. Damn, he went around. Co-navigator William Wales had used a Larcom Kendall K1 chronometer to calculate longitude and had compiled the logbook of the voyage. In fact, the captain's journal is available online. On screen you can see the path Captain Cook took. To me, that looks like someone who's looking for something, instead of just trying to go to point A from point B. Once we see the actual path, the distance begins to make sense, right? Now please don't try to measure the line length. This is a very bird's eye view. If you do want to, you will need to refer to the actual log for recorded locations. As for Sir James Clark Ross, he led the Ross Expedition, that was a voyage of scientific exploration of the Antarctic, in 1839 to 1843. It explored what is now called the Ross Sea and discovered the Ross Ice Shelf. On the expedition, Ross discovered the Transantarctic Mountains and the volcanoes Erebus and Terror, named after his ships. Unfortunately, I can't find the total distance mentioned anywhere, and only one image that is supposed to be the path taken. Since then, many other expeditions had taken place. Back in 1819, Russia took on their Russian Antarctic expedition, which ended in complete success and became the second expedition to circumnavigate Antarctica after James Cook's expedition a half a century earlier. Of the expedition's 751 days, 527 were spent at sea. The overall length of the route was 49,860 nautical miles. You can see their route path on screen. And of course, you can hop on to many booming tourism routes for a sightseeing cruise.
On the ball Earth, several flights would have their shortest, quickest, and straightest path over or around the Antarctic continent. One flight that should be a simple 11-hour shot across the Indian Ocean is from Johannesburg, South Africa to Perth, Australia. However, this flight takes a detour north, stopping in either Dubai, Hong Kong, or Malaysia to refuel.
Flight is one of my hobby, and I would love to go over it once again. But the thing is, I have two detailed videos. One debunking Flat Earth 101 flyer, plane flights, 100 of flights every day makes fuel stop that makes no sense, and another debunking Flat Earther Kyle Adams and his Flat Earth science lesson on Australian plane flights. Links would be in description. So without repeating myself too much, at the end of the day, airliners is a business. And if a route is not profitable enough, it wouldn't exist. Or get the CEO fired when he bribes a politician with such. First, Perth to Johannesburg. Well, according to Skyscanner, South African Airways offers non-stop flights to Johannesburg from Perth, and these depart daily. But I know most flat earthers deny the pandemic that is going on, and South African Airways have grounded a lot of their flights. And of course, there is a COVID-19 alert for South Africa. At the time of this video, I couldn't find a direct flight. But looking at world map, if there is a conspiracy why there is no direct flight between Perth and Johannesburg, that should surely hold for Sydney to Johannesburg, right? Qantas has a flight that I can book that would take 14 hours 5 minutes. The distance is around 11,034 kilometers, which gives us an average cruising speed of 788 kilometers per hour.
Is from Johannesburg to Santiago, Chile. While an easy 12-hour flight below the Tropic of Capricorn is to be expected, instead, every flight crosses the equator to refuel in Senegal. A third flight from Johannesburg is to São Paulo, Brazil, which should be a direct 10-hour flight across the 25th degree south latitude. But instead, every flight crosses into the north to stop in London.
I'm getting deja vu. Well, as far as I can see, there are no airlines that fly directly from Santiago to Johannesburg, also confirmed by Skyscanner. But does it prove the point at hand? The video keeps talking about refueling. Is that really the case? Well, on my earlier videos, I briefly touched on it, so let's go full aboard this time. No, refueling is not the case. It's a product of the maneuver, the same way a crew might change. The real reason is ETOPS. No, I'm not making it up. It stands for Extended Twin Operational Performance Standards. Basically, ETOPS is like a boundary in which a certain plane must stay inside, because if there is an engine failure, then it can safely divert to a nearby airport. In 1953, the FAA 60-minute rule restricted twin-engine aircraft to a 60 minutes diversion area, based on the piston engine's reliability of the time, with flexibility beyond with special approval. In 1985, the FAA increased the ETOPS to 120 minutes at the single-engine cruise speed. You can see an example of ETOPS 120. All the dark spot you can see is where the gaps are. In 1988, the FAA amended the ETOPS regulation to allow the extension to a 180-minute diversion period. ETOPS 180 and ETOPS 207 covers about 95% of the Earth. On December 12, 2011, Boeing received type design approval from the FAA for up to 330-minute extended operation for its Boeing 777 series. Finally, Airbus A350XYB was first to receive an ETOPS 370 prior to entry into service by European authority. You can see a map for ETOPS 370 with no gap over land. Now for A330 or 787, ETOPS is 180, and we can see the path a flight would need to take from South America to South Africa and how it crosses over the gap. So how did some airlines like Qantas get around it? we have already seen a flight from Sydney to Johannesburg. Well, this airlines uses a neat trick to get around ETOPS called a quadjet. Basically using an aircraft like Boeing 747-400 or the Airbus A340-300, which bypasses the ETOPS restriction. Remember, it stands for Extended Twin Engine Operations. Basically that's it. Demand with ETOPS regulation or expensive aircraft is what stops such flight. Trust me, ETOPS is a good thing.
From Santiago, Chile to Sydney, Australia, a straight 15-hour flight across the South Pacific is expected. Despite refueling options in either New Zealand or any island in the South Pacific, the flight stops all the way at Los Angeles.
Well, guess what? I had found this flight for my last debunking. Direct flight Sydney to Santiago that takes 12 hours 35 minutes. Oh sugar, you will not accept this, will you? It needed to be Santiago to Sydney and not Sydney to Santiago. I jest.
So investigate the subject for yourself.
Well, that is all for Down South.
Flat Earth Proof 8. Star Trails.
This is embarrassing. I had debunked this exact video on the series Nathan Thompson's Flat Earth Flyer completely. I think I did an okay job. So here is past me. So the argument here is Earth rotates around its own axis, then it orbits the Sun. The Sun itself is spiraling around the Milky Way, where the galaxy itself is rocketing through the universe. And yet we find ancient sundials that can still reliably tell time. Further, if we consider all the constellations and the countless descriptions from ancient description are exactly the same as in present days. If the Earth and the stars are all shooting through the universe, then the stellar body should not be as unchanging as they are. In fact, we should have a different constantly changing night sky with some stars moving faster than others. If you look at Polaris that is so far away, it should have a trajectory of its own, and Polaris can be seen as far as south as 20 degrees south latitude and even farther. So that's the summary. Pretty compelling, wouldn't you say? Well, you know what I think one of our problems is? Most of us, well, we don't comprehend large numbers. I'll give an example. 1000 minutes is only 16.6 hours. But 1 million minutes? Well, it is 1.9 years. How about 1 billion minutes? Brace for it. It is 1902 years. One of the earliest civilizations we know of are the Aboriginal Australians, who can trace their ancestry back to about 75,000 years ago. That is a long time ago. Guess how old the Earth is? It is estimated to be 4.54 billion years old, plus or minus about 50 million years. Our existence is a speck of dust, even when comparing to just Earth. Forget the galaxy or the universe. Next, Earth is rotating at a blistering speed of 1609 km per hour. That is fast. Faster than any commercial flight that cruises around 926 km per hour. Nice. Earth's orbital speed is a bit higher. We travel at 107,000 km per hour. That is over 66 times faster than rotation speed. Wow! And Earth does it remarkably well. In fact, it does it so well that we use the shadow from the apparent travel of Sun to create a device, one of the oldest known instruments for telling time. Used by the Babylonians and ancient Greeks, this is sundial. The fact the Earth is a very accurate clock, rotating at a constant speed, is the reason up to 1972 it was the international standard for timekeeping, until the atomic clock took over. So yeah, sundials are still pretty accurate. Now remember that super fast orbital speed of 107,000 km per hour? Well, compare that to the speed of light, which is a measly 1.08 billion km per hour. When we talk about stellar body, we mostly can't comprehend how far they truly are. We estimate Polaris to be only 323 light years away, only. So if Polaris got destroyed right now, it would take us 323 years to find out. In the Great Pyramid of Giza, some mysterious shafts were recognized as being aligned with stars or areas of sky as the sky appeared for the pyramid's builder 5,000 years ago. As you see, 5,000 years ago, it was Tuban, a relatively inconspicuous star in the constellation Draco the Dragon, was the pole star when the Egyptians were building the pyramids. On March 24, year 2100, Polaris would be 0.4525 degrees from the North Celestial Pole. In year 4000, we would be calling Erie our North Star. Fast forward to 7500. That honor would belong to Elderamin, that is, if we manage to last that long. Polaris being seen from as far as south as 20 degrees south latitude is a blatant lie. Although Polaris is known as the North Star, it has a declination of 89.34 degree. The difference is 0.66 degree. Would be Polaris's peak altitude if viewed from the equator, and the latitude south of the equator from which the star would scrape the horizon, if Earth had no atmosphere. But our atmosphere refracts starlight, causing the object near the horizon to appear higher than it really is. Under typical atmospheric condition, this adds 0.57 degree to an object's altitude, so Polaris would barely show up from 1.23 degree south latitude. But to be fair, in 12,600 years, Polaris will be visible anywhere north of 45.95 degree south latitude. So maybe this is referring to that point? Our lifetime is just a dust in cosmic time. Well, that would be all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this content so far, please drop a like and comment, and maybe even subscribe to know of my latest uploads debunking the rest. That would be greatly appreciated and would help my small channel grow. Have a safe day. Signing off.